So I'm Peter Pope. I've lived in Cambridge for almost 50 years. Um, my background is in science. I came to a full-term, a long-term partnership quite late in life, um, and that obviously affects my outlook on the world to a great degree. My first response to the word democracy is somewhat negative. Um, because I relate it to arguments and division and people having to make difficult decisions, a lot of bureaucracy. But nevertheless, I see democracy as being the only viable route to a good society. And who wouldn't want a good society? Well, I became a member of a political party um, more than 35 years ago. And for around 20 years, I stood in local elections without any great hope of being elected, but just to make sure that the electorate had the opportunity to vote for a different voice, different set of concepts. Um, and at the same time, it gave my party, which is the Green Party, the opportunity to measure the response in a particular ward in the city. I gave that up, I suppose, 15 years ago, along the lines of, it's time for the young ones now. I've done my bit. But in 2004, I joined another organisation which is called Compass. And this is something that's grown out of the Labour Party, but it is absolutely upfront about wanting to engage all progressive elements in politics. So it involves the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats and the Scottish Nationalists and Plaid Cymru, and I guess anybody else who wants to join in. And that has felt like something in a way that's better than a political party, because rather than trying to strongly define its own perspective and its own limit, shall we say, the focus is very much on cooperation. And my feeling about democracy is that it should be about cooperation rather than competition and the kind of behaviour that we see in the Houses of Parliament, where, as I suggested before, arguments and division seem to be the order of the day. So, yeah, I've been with Compass now for 20 years or so, and found their approach inspirational. And it's also been an opportunity to showcase a cooperation between mainstream parties, in that within the Houses of Parliament, there's been a partnership, effectively, between Clive Lewis of the Labour Party and Caroline Lucas of the Green Party. And it's just been uplifting to see that kind of cooperation going on. As I was growing up, I was in an essentially non-political family, and had no real understanding or interest in politics until the 1980s, when we saw the arrival of the SDP, the Social Democratic Party. And because I suppose my little understanding of politics, it's just seemed to be a wrangling between Labour and Conservatives, and I couldn't really see the difference between them even. I had a naive approach. But when the SDP came along, they said they were going to break the mold of British politics. And I thought, oh, that's wonderful. Let's shake things up a bit and see what comes out. And as it turned out, by 1987, the SDP was had a following, and Shirley Williams stood to be Cambridge's MP. So I had the opportunity to vote for her, which I did. She didn't get in, and subsequently the SDP sort of dissolved away, one might say. There's an arrangement so that effectively they became part of what are now the Liberal Democrats. But what that process did was to actually put politics onto my radar. Um, and it didn't mean that I then sort of followed that route into the Liberal Democrats. I thought this is my opportunity to think things out from first principles and decide what are my main priorities. And that is what is commonly called environmentalism. I felt you can't have a democracy if you don't have a livable planet. And so I decided to join the Green Party. That was probably 1988. And at the time, possibly the most prominent voice associated with the Green Party was Jonathan Porritt. And I went to a Schumacher lecture that he gave. I think it was 1988. And that was an inspiration. I felt for the first time in my life I'd been in the presence of a true orator. He was an English graduate. He knew how to use the language, and the audience, I think, numbered 1,000 people roundabout. And I felt that he held that audience in the palm of his hand. That's inspiration. I think the first thing is that our democracy is too centralized. I do go to London occasionally, mostly to take part in demonstrations. And so I find myself in the Westminster area. And I'm struck by the fact that it is, of course, the Palace of Westminster, and it has good golden decorations. It is a palace of the elite. And I have been to speak to my MP there. And it doesn't really feel like speaking to a human being. It feels like speaking to an element of a party machine. It lacks humanity. And what we see from debates that go on inside the House is this matter of competition. It's like a kind of boxing match, it seems. And if you kind of take a step back and think, these are the people who are trying to run the country, but all they seem to know about is how to knock down other people. There's no spirit of cooperation. And although I'm well aware that there is a cooperative party, which is remarkable in that it's a unique case where people are allowed to be members of two political parties. They can be a member of the Labour Party and the Cooperative Party. And I think when I checked, there are in fact 64 members of the Cooperative Party in the House. But we don't hear very much about them. And that's maybe because the media actually like to record a bun fight. It's good for their viewer figures and so on. So yeah, I'd like to see more in the way of cooperation going on in politics. Another thing that disturbs me is the very low turnout that we have in elections. So I could easily favour the system that they run in Australia, where voting is mandatory. and if you don't vote, you get fined. Uh, I don't know, somebody who fell foul of that, a neighbour who was in the UK for a while. There was an election. He didn't even know about it, and he was fined. But he was able to argue his case. And with this business of the uh, 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 um, politics being elitist, the House of Lords, where Lords can just turn up for the day and claim their fee of, I've just looked it up, £361 a day, and they don't actually have to do anything. And that doesn't sound like democracy to me. Uh, this also kind of brings up the notion of what's often referred to as proportional representation. It's an issue that I've discussed with my MP, and he says he's very much in favour of having a system of PR for the Lords, but not for the Commons. He claims it's too complicated, and I haven't been able to press him deeply on that point. Um, PR is somewhat contentious in our household because we have a neighbour who has been a professional consultant in running elections. And what she says is we definitely do not want PR by that specific name, because if you want PR, what you get is Israel. And that's obviously a very poor example. It happens this lady is Jewish. That's probably neither here nor there. So a system of elections which are not first past the post. She, in particular, I regard her as an expert on the matter, would favour the alternative vote, which of course we had a referendum on back in 2015, was it? And that was rejected, but rejected largely because the electorate were not educated about what they were letting themselves in for. It just sounded like something strange, or this is my interpretation. And better the devil we know than the devil we don't. So the various campaigns like Make Votes Matter, who are promoting an alternative voting system, I think they are clear that it would be simply a matter of putting an alternative voting system on the cards and having a wide-ranging, long-term debate about which version of not first past the post you actually end up with. And for me, this is associated with the backdrop to the whole of politics, that we are not educated to do politics. We are educated to be part of the existing neoliberal regime, that our duty, as it were, is to be a good consumer and to grow the economy. And you don't necessarily have to understand what you're doing as long as you ring up the pound signs. So the major fault line for me in current politics is that it's grounded in the neoliberal agenda, which I think is completely wrong. And whenever I hear comments to the effect that it's falling apart, I'm very happy to hear that because I like to believe that something much better would actually arise from a wide-ranging discussion. Well, I've suggested that our existing system is too centralized. So the antidote to that is strong decentralization. My feeling is that governance should actually take place at a bioregional level. And I'm not even an expert on bioregions, but the classic way to think about it is grounded in geography and water catchments. So river valleys have always been the place where people would congregate. The ground is level. It's easy to build there on the floodplains, and the the rainwater catchment, to a certain extent, determines the kind of agriculture which is appropriate to the area. So I could imagine the UK, as we have it at the moment, divided into a couple of dozen bioregions, perhaps. Um, and the East Anglia would be one, an area of very low rainfall, an area in the fens which has been changed very substantially by human activity through the process of drainage. So in that sense, it's a non-natural environment. It just happens to be the breadbasket of the UK at the moment, because its remaining peat soils are very productive, even though they're being used up and blown away. And it's been suggested there are only 30 or 40 harvests left in the east of England. So if your governance takes into account the fragility of the ecosystem in which you operate, it's likely that you'll look after that ecosystem rather better. So my dream of the form of governance within these geographical areas would be to use citizen assemblies. Again, against the background of a community, a citizenship, which is well educated in what it takes to run a sustainable economy. And citizen assemblies are traditionally selected by sortition. It's not an electoral process. So you guarantee that you get a wide range of people from different backgrounds involved. And it seems that politics has been directed towards increasing our prosperity. I got very annoyed in the years of the Blair premiership, because he seemed to use the word prosperity very frequently. And what he seemed to mean by that is everybody having more and more money. Just drawing an identity between prosperity and wealth. And we know, of course, the trickle-down system doesn't work. In fact, it works in the opposite direction. It sucks money from those who have very little and puts it in the pockets of those who have a lot. So I've been very glad quite recently to come across a piece of work by Tim Jackson, who was well known for writing a book called Prosperity Without Growth. And more recently, he has produced a further book, which is called The Care Economy. And his starting point for this is really that prosperity is about health, not about wealth, mental health in particular. And this fits in very nicely with my perspective that we need a population which is much better educated about health as being the foundation of a good life, but also set in the context that we're part of a community, and we need to be thinking not just about ourselves as individuals, but about the communities that we're part of. And I think maybe this is kind of soft socialism approaches to socialism from the grassroots upwards, not any kind of state socialism that is imposed. from above. And my kind of longer term foundation for this actually comes from reading John Maynard Keynes, uh, writing almost a century ago. He produced a piece of work called Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. So he was looking forward to the 21st century, and imagining that there would have been economic development, um, and capitalism would be doing its job. He was, after all, an economist, and he knew how to work the numbers. And he suggested that over a period of a century or so, um, if you have steady growth, then you can bring prosperity. He perhaps wasn't using that word at that time, um, to a broad swathe of people. You would His language was around the notion of solving the problems of production, the development of machinery, of automation to do a lot of dull work would leave people with a lot of free time. And in a different piece of work, he calculated that we might be working a 15-hour week, 15-hour week. And that would leave so much time available for us to do what I've spoken about, the education, to understand how prosperity could be so much richer through thinking not about money, but thinking about health. And his description of people having more leisure time, I think, led during the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, to discussion about working towards a leisure society. What are we all going to do with our time when the work is being done by robots or whatever? But how differently it has actually turned out. We can do so much now without using a lot of physical energy a lot of time, and yet we don't have a 15-hour working week. Many people are having to hold down multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. And that is not in any way the good society that I referred to earlier on. And in fact, because I talked about Compass, and the fact that their objective is the good society. But I think you can only have a really good society if people have time on their hands, which they can use in not a productive way. I think there's far too much emphasis on productivity because that's what you need to make the neoliberal dream come true. But time to dream, and in a way, which is, of course, what we're doing right this moment. Um, uh, I, I think this comes out of a piece of poetry, and I'm not a great follower of poetry, but those immortal lines: "What is life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare," and to enjoy the natural world around us, and this simple joy that's available from people just exercising their freedom of will, but in the context of a belief in a supportive society with shared values and shared objectives, and the willingness to help others when help is called for. That's my dream.